7:01. Okay, let's get this meeting started. Central Berkshire Regional School District. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. Anybody else recording it besides Dalton TV?
I have
Recording in progress.
Sabrina's note taker on the message to be admitted. Is that all right? Okay.
So Berkshire's is also recording someone?
Yes.
Okay, just so everybody knows, we're on the video. Okay, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese. Here. Charlotte Crane. Here. Dr. Eberwein.
Here.
Todd Emerson.
Here.
Mr. Farella.
Here.
Ellen Latazori. Here. Elizabeth Lounsbury. Here. John Mason.
Here.
Stephen Morantz.
Here.
Elizabeth Oakes. Rich Peters.
Here.
Robert Ronzio.
Present.
Mr. Stewart.
Here.
Sarah Tucker.
Here.
Kimberly Weatherall.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a quorum. We're all good. All right, first up, Student Affairs, is Sophie or Daniel online, or no?
No.
No Student Affairs, okay. So the financial reports, we have warrants that were previously signed. And then gifts and donations and grants. First one's an acceptance of donation.
Rich, shouldn't take questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Comments from the
Public
audience. Thank you very much. How could I forget Mr. Locatell?
Dave Stewart was kind enough to show me this memo that appeared in your materials for tonight and deals with the amendment to the regional agreement. I don't agree with a lot of this information that's in this memo. And I hope it really doesn't go any farther than you seeing it tonight. What it does, it keeps controversial issues alive. It continues them, people will revisit them constantly. Moreover, it raises more controversial issues that I don't really think you want to have raised at this point. If you do choose to publicize it more, I'd like to go through a couple of things that I disagree with. If you look at it, the second paragraph says, many important changes were made. Excuse me. Including the addition of budget, roundtable, and so forth. All of that's correct. A lot of things were changed, but it was mostly words. Doesn't have a great effect on how we function among the towns. What's missing is what really changed in the regional agreement amendment. And the first of those was the calculation of the OPEB liability. That's huge. That was a major issue when we were talking about separating Covington, and we didn't have that. This amendment has that. The second one was the treatment of a town when one of our buildings is closed and the students have to relocate for a year or 6 months or so. What happens to the assessments? Well, that was the subject of a suit. The towns were, 6 of the towns were sued, and the district was sued, and it cost a lot of money for the various legal representation. You'll never guess what town initiated that. The third or fourth paragraph said some concerns are left unresolved. Well, unresolved by whom? As soon as the RAC made their recommendation and the school committee voted something, that resolves things. You're always going to find somebody or even some town that's not going to agree with something. And it said we should have continued dialogue. Do you really want continued dialogue? And you should have a unified agreement in the future. I don't think it's possible to have a unified agreement. A lot of issues were discussed, some are talked about now well after RAC has concluded its work. Some were adopted, some were not adopted, some were presented to the RAC, some were not. If you go into any watering hole, you can find some issues. And there are even issues that you hear amongst you right now. What does that mean? We keep the regional agreement open until we address those? I don't think so. So I hope that this doesn't go any farther than where it is tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Dick. Sorry, now back to our regularly scheduled program. So first up, we got to the grants and donations. Acceptance of a donation from the class of 1985 to WRHS School Grounds.
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire School Committee accepts the donation of a bench for the school grounds in honor of classmate and class advisor Robert Boog Powell.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Yes.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Ellen Ladazori?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Mariantz?
Yes.
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
Motion carries. Next up is acceptance of grant.
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee accepts the Targeted Special Education Program Improvement Grant totaling $10,000 as recommended by the District Treasurer.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on this one? Yeah, Liz.
Is this grant something that we have gotten in the past, or?
That's a good question.
So this is the second time we've received this. This is a entitlement grant from the federal government. It's really due to the new IEP that's out, to make sure all districts are where they need to be with the new IEP, with families, community engagement. So this will probably be the last time we receive this.
Any other? Roll call vote, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Yes.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Ellen Ladazori?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Mariantz?
Yes.
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
Motion carries. Next up, acceptance of donation to the Sadie and Charles Boraski Scholarship Fund.
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee accept the donations of $11,998 from Berkshire Taconic to the Sadie and Charles Boraski Scholarship Fund as recommended by the District Treasurer.
Second.
Motion and second. Any questions or concerns on this one? Seeing none, hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Yes.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Ellen Ladazori?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Mariantz?
Yes.
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
Motion carries. Next up, acceptance of donation to the Aaron Barnes Memorial Scholarship.
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee accept the donations of $1,000 from COBB Society of Western Mass to the Aaron Barnes Memorial Scholarship Fund as recommended by the District Treasurer.
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions on this one?
What is the Cobb Society?
Any idea?
So that is a biking group. This was a Wacona graduate who passed away. Could be up to like 5 years ago now. So they donate this every year for a scholarship.
Any other questions? Roll call vote, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Yes.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Ellen Ladazori?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Mariantz?
Yes.
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
Motion carries. Next up, acceptance of donation to Beckett Washington Elementary School.
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee accept the following donation from O'Connor Studio totaling $553.87 as recommended by the District Treasurer.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on this one? Questions? Seeing
Can
none
I
here?
just ask what that amount is for?
I can answer
Go
that.
ahead.
So when when the schools contract with an organization that takes pictures, takes their portrait pictures, those are the pictures that you see that go home with the students, and they take sometimes group class pictures, they generally make a donation back to the school.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Dr. Crafties?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Yes.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Alan Ladazori?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Moritz?
Yes.
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
Yes.
All right, that's the donations. Next up is the secretary report, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of February 27th, 2025. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion, questions? Yeah.
Just a typo on page 5, where it says moved by a member, there's a misspelling in my last name.
Oh, Ellen, I'm sorry. Sorry, Ellen. Got it. Ah, I give it to you at least once every year.
Yes.
Sorry, Ellen.
It's okay.
Okay, I got it.
Just make it a standing.
Sorry.
Any other questions, concerns? All right, roll call vote to approve as amended.
Dr. Crafties?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Yes.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Alan Ladazori?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Moritz?
Yes.
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
Motion carries. I was tempted to vote no.
I will then take it up with the Social Security office.
Superintendent's report.
Okay, so I don't have a whole lot this evening, just a couple of things. I wanted to just encourage everyone to, if they could, go to the Wacona Apollonian Players Guys and Dolls. It's going to be a pretty, they're working pretty hard, and I think it's going to be a fun presentation. The other thing that I have is the DEIB group, as well as the parent advisory, got together and we looked at a document that we included in your packet, which was given to us by the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, and it's really about how we provide services and for our students, and just a clarification of some of the messages I think that we've also received on a federal level. So we looked at that. And we also looked at other statements that some other districts had come out with around how we serve our students. We also looked at a statement by the Secretary of Education Tutwiler, and we kind of crafted our own statement. We really chose to take what I would say is a nonpartisan approach. We basically wanted to reaffirm that students that we're a public institution, students that come to our door, we serve everyone. We serve all our students equitably. We do our very best to meet everyone's needs. We're fair, we care for them. And so we came up with a statement. It was the recommendation from this committee that I put the statement out in one of my newsletters to families, but before doing so, and I can read it, I'll read it for everyone. I wanted to just open it up to any discussion on the part of the school committee in case you had any recommendations on your part. The statement is as follows. The DEIB Committee of CBRSD moves to reaffirm our commitment to ensuring that all students feel safe, supported, and fully included in our school community and have access to equal educational opportunities. We want all students, staff, and community members to know that CBRSD schools will always be welcoming places where everyone is protected and cared for. I do want to also mention another document that we looked at is our policy document. So we do have something in policy, and it needs probably some revision. But we did reference it in this, it does exist in our policy.
Any Questions? Yeah, Liz.
So Leslie had discussed this with Safety and Wellness back earlier this week. And my only comment on it was that I would prefer to see it say equitable educational opportunities. I know that it comes specifically from policy 6110, equal education opportunities. But I think that this comment should reinforce the idea that we are giving students what they need specifically to have an equal access to education. So equitable would be more appropriate in this situation.
I mean, I'm more than happy to change that to equitable. I understand there's a difference. And if it's, if there's some consensus on the part of school committee.
I mean, I was a part of that initial
Yeah,
conversation.
Sarah, I meant to mention that Sarah was there and Mike was
So
there.
we kind of, I mean, we did talk about that versus because it's a valid point.
Yeah.
What we did is focus on following the policy. We
Right.
talked about at some point the policy.
The policy is eventually going to be revised probably.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think there would be any hard push to use that wordage.
I will say that the policy, that specific one was last updated 2013, so it is
Right.
an older policy.
Oh, now it's.
213, that should really do it.
Older.
Thank you.
We also did bring this up too. We had an instructional leadership team meeting. We call them ILTs. About a week ago, we presented it to them. We wanted to make sure they're sort of our champions of teaching and learning, and we wanted to make sure that they were in support or didn't have any comments about it, and they were also similarly supportive.
And I don't think that the committee would waver around having go to equitable. The spirit of the discussion was to really message that we're going to continue to do what we are doing and nothing's changing, and we're still a welcoming place where all students get what they need. So I think that equitable does fit into that.
Any other? Yeah, Dave?
How would this be used, or where would it, what do we do with it? Like,
So-
statements are
so
fine, but,
No, so
you know.
the recommendation was that I put it out in my message, that principals could include it in their messaging. Beyond that, we didn't really talk about where else it would go. But it was just that questions had come up and other districts had made these affirmations, and we talked about making one of our own. But I wouldn't put that out without support of the school committee, but it would go out through my message.
We also have a specific webpage that the Parent Advisory and DEIB Committee has as a subset of our website, and if it was going to live somewhere publicly, that would
Would live
probably
there.
be the place where it would go.
Yeah, Barb.
I'm glad you're doing this. I think it's really important given the conditions of our world today. So thank you for doing it.
Ellen?
And I just want to make the point, and I made it at Safety and Wellness, that DEIB goes beyond the controversial version that is always being put forth, where, racial diversity or religious. In our district, because we're not very racially or ethnically diverse, it means also economic diversity, Hilltown versus Dalton, title or tier 3 versus tier 1 education. So all kids have an equitable opportunity to get an education here in the district, regardless of any group that they may belong to or feel that they are part of.
It's really that last word, belonging, that encompasses everybody, so.
Right, and
yeah,
that, right,
absolutely,
and that
to
was
your
a
point.
point that we, Sarah, I think you brought that up, that how important that is, that we include all. It's really about all and belonging.
You, Paul?
I don't want to open a can of worms.
But you're going. Careful.
Is there any concern, or has it been discussed at all? I believe I saw somewhere that there's like some federal site or something to report schools that are, are doing something with DEI, and we don't know what happens from there though, but was that brought up at all? Or?
It wasn't brought up,
Yeah.
but that I don't think that I would have brought it in front of school committee if I wasn't more aware of that than I would have been in the past. So that is why I'm bringing it up in front of school committee. I don't know, I don't have any specific thing that I'm worried it going to a specific place, but I do think I would want the support of school committee before I put it in my message.
The Attorney General's letter that we received last week, or 2 weeks ago now, specifically said that, despite the executive order that was issued in February and the Dear Colleague letter that was sent out by the Department of Education, with their interpretation of the Supreme Court decision against Harvard, that regardless of those two things, it's still, in the state of Massachusetts, it's not only our ethical but our legal responsibility to provide education for all students, and I don't think that that statement I think it's right in line with the Attorney General's office, so we have the Mass Attorney General's backing the spirit of the statement.
Ellen?
And a couple years back, we did have an equity audit here in the district, and they did cite, we don't have nothing of controversialness here pushing those controversial portions of DEI, but they did cite what I had said, that we have diversity economically, types of towns. So we have that backing to say that when we talk about our students, we mean all of our students regardless.
And I don't have an issue with this.
No.
It's
No,
more
I know.
just the
No, it's a very good question
potential
because,
implications.
no,
of
because
that
we
road
are definitely
funding.
getting some, I'm also receiving some conflicting messages from, from more federally driven. So like I said, I wouldn't be bringing it to all of you if I wasn't, I wanted some input.
Because there is a portal, a federal portal to report teachers and like schools,
Right.
there is. And Massachusetts, in my opinion, would be the outlier of many of the states. So we did talk about it, it's a very unknown time, a very, very unknown time. And
Right.
we felt, as a part of that committee, that our message just really needs to be to our students. We are here, we're not going anywhere, we're gonna keep taking care of you. But,
Right.
I think we all are scared about the unknown.
And so the New York Times released a list of all the terminology recently that was targeted, and our statement doesn't have any of that, other than DEIB itself.
Yeah.
And that was not purposeful, but as I read it, we
Checking
did
us.
purposefully go down the middle of the political spectrum to make sure that we were making a statement about our schools being safe for all students and supported, and kept it at that purposely.
Away from the AI bots.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't cite the Enola Gay in the statement either, so.
Transportation.
I'm pretty sure that it's safe.
That is really all I have.
Okay, so next up is me, and I really don't have anything until personnel, so I'll wait till personnel. Just the annual town meetings, they're kind of listed there, just the time is confirmed on Washington Day. So first up on the subcommittee reports and recommendations is curriculum.
Hi, everybody. Curriculum has not met since our last school committee meeting. We have a meeting coming up next Wednesday, the 19th at 7 p.m. on Zoom, where we're going to be getting an update on the science piloting at the middle school, ELA piloting at the high school. We may be talking about the upcoming field trip, our Green Umbrella field trip to Costa Rica in 2026 if the paperwork is available. And then we are also going to be, and the biggest topic is going to be going over graduation requirements and in lieu of MCAS no longer being there for us to use.
Any questions? Okay, next up is finance.
So we do have this, you want to start with the present? How do you want?
Well, how about I give a little quick update on our meeting, and then we can jump into the budget. So briefly, we met on March 6th to just discuss more of this budget. We spent a decent amount of time going through different pieces and what our thoughts were moving forward. We agreed, or we got to a place where it was agreed that we could maintain positions, but we really are going to have to focus on putting very strict controls in place on costs going forward. Some of the other items we touched on were how there is a deep need for the community as a whole to rally to petition the state to change Chapter 70 in rural aid. How just the way that they work make it extremely difficult for us to make a budget that is fair to towns when you have some that have high percentages of assessment and others with negative. It can create a sticky situation. Let's see, and then just to say, our next meeting is to be determined. It's sort of based partially on how we vote tonight.
So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I will tell you that there hasn't been a lot. There really isn't anything that's changed from this week to the last time you saw this budget. Tonight we actually vote on the budget, and so some of the slides we're going to just highlight some of those things. We're not going to go into them in depth, but again, I would encourage you to ask any questions. In terms of the goals remain that we are, our goal is to provide or to maximize high quality instruction, to provide social and emotional support for students. We've also discussed at times in finance and in various organizational meetings that we have very much become community hubs for students. Our poverty rate has gone up. So we are seen as community support, as a community support hubs for our families. So but at the same time, we are cognizant of the fact that our towns also we have to be fiscally responsible to our towns. So those goals have remained the same, and I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
Okay. So like Leslie said, these have not changed by a penny since our public hearing a couple weeks ago. So our gross final budget number, this is all funds, is sitting at $36,643,001. That is a 2.7% increase year over year. Our increases and decreases, like we've said in the past, our biggest increase this year was our health insurance. Our active health insurance premium saw a 16% increase. Retirees saw 20%. We did see a small on dental. Another large increase this year, and it's just to meet the actual expenditures where we're living right now, is our special ed transportation. That line did go up by $135,000. Some decreases we saw this year, so we are budgeting for 2 less buses than we have in the past. And then our special ed out of district, that line did go down year over year. That is due to students aging out, so they are no longer going to be at those out of district schools. Oh, we also, the finance subcommittee did decrease our OPEB amount by $350,000, so next year we'll be funding it with $50,000. These are the same salary changes. All the new positions we've added this year, all the certified positions we've added this year are the ones we're currently living with right now. They were added after the budget was adopted last year. We did have to add 2.2 FTEs in paraprofessionals. That is due to IEPs and student needs. We did have some decreases through retirements. We did have a reduction of an admin assistant at Nessacus, instructional coach at the high school, and a Title I tutor at the high school. And these reallocations have not changed, I believe, since the initial budget. Those are just positions where they were doing a different thing this year than they were last year. Our biggest story this year is our revenue changes, especially in our grant funds and our revolving funds, as we talked about. If you remember, the Finance Subcommittee added more into rural aid next year, so in FY25 we had about $720,000 in salaries out of rural aid. Next year in our FY26 rural aid, we'll be using just over 1.2. The other thing we'll be using next year is some of our school choice fund. We have not done that the last couple of years, but we do have 340,000 salaries out of school choice next year. So the variance year over year of our grant funds for salaries, it did see an increase, but only an increase of 99,000. The only other place that we do have other funds used in the budget, one would be through circuit breaker special ed tuition. We do have 600,000 that we have, that is revenue we're bringing in this year, so at the end of this year, we know exactly how much we have in our circuit breaker fund. We'll have 600,000 for special ed tuition, and then we are prepaying some special ed tuition this year, about 313,000. So this leaves our gross operating budget at $32,233,498. That is the number that needs to be appropriated either through state aid, local funds, and town assessments. The major change on this since the beginning of the budget season is the E&D appropriation. We are using all of our E&D fund in FY26. We usually leave $250,000 in the fund in case of emergencies popping up in the year. At the end of this fiscal year, there will be no money left to start the next E&D fund with what we have left this year. That leaves our town assessments at 3.97% year over year. So the average of our town assessments are 3.97, but they do range from a negative 2.65 in Cummington up to an 8.2 in Peru. Those fluctuations really stem from the required local contribution from the state. For the most cases, those increases do fairly closely match what the increase the state's saying they can afford. But anything over that required contribution, that's what that 5-year average is used for. The last piece of the puzzle for our budget is the capital budget. There is an increase this year of just under $300,000. That is due to the Beckett Washington project coming off the books, but also going out for bond for the Wacona project. So we went down, but then we also went up by more. So there is an increase of just under $300,000.
We have sent several, 2 or 3 letters to the towns offering both Greg and I to attend to their finance meetings as well as their select board meetings. We were originally scheduled to go to Windsor. They communicated to us that they understood the budget well. They said they didn't need us to come out, but we told them we'd be willing to if more questions came up. We attended Hinsdale tonight, which is, Paul, thank you to Paul, and David attended as well. Rich was there, and Greg and I, and Jake. And they had lots of questions about positions. They had lots of questions about very particular line items. Very, very respectful. We just basically said to them, if you continue to have questions, to reach out. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that from who was there.
No, we'll see. Okay, I think we have some.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we go to vote. So, we haven't been to Peru, right?
We have not been to Peru, so
so, is that the only town that you haven't been to yet?
No, so the only towns that we have heard from are Windsor and Hinsdale. So I think we've heard from Dalton.
In Dalton,
and Dalton.
yesterday, yes.
So we're going to be going to Dalton as well. I have not heard yet from Peru, but we'd be happy to go.
So are we voting on this budget tonight before we go to those other towns?
Yes,
We
so,
are.
and that is, I actually understand where you're coming from, because Peru is seeing a large increase, and they really might not have seen it. But we do have to vote on, it tonight because of state law. The school committee needs to adopt a budget 45 days before the first town meeting. But we're more than happy to come to Peru and.
But what you're doing is you're voting on this budget before you, went to the other towns that you haven't been to. You're not giving them the same courtesy of coming to those towns.
So
you're still voting on it. So that's my question here, is that they're not getting the same courtesy as the towns that you have been to answer questions.
Right, so that's a really good point. What the reason we have the public hearing, which was on the, was it the 13th, or 27th, which was the 27th, that's what that is intended for. The public hearing is really intended for all the towns to come and ask us questions, and that, you know, we do that so that if they say to us, well, is there any way you can make an adjustment, or, you know, just give us feedback. And I know this year, both Beth and I really reached out to make sure they knew about the public hearing, because we absolutely wanted them here. We wanted to hear any concerns that they had. They did not reach out to us. Having said that,
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
And I will say, Kim, that us attending Windsor and Hinsdale and Dalton, they were responding to our letters to come to their towns. We just have not heard from Peru. So we didn't reach out to the towns we've attended so far to go to present the budget. They were in response to the letters that we've sent to all towns.
So, can you tell me again what towns you have not been to?
So we have not been to Peru, Washington, Beckett, and Cummington.
Yeah.
And we have not been to Windsor, but we did attend Windsor back in January.
Oh, we did go to Windsor, yeah.
The Windsor Wave.
Yes.
They did, well, they invited us, we went in person, and then they wanted us to come back a second time. And then they, at the last minute, said they felt that they didn't need us to.
Thank you.
Ellen, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I was
Thank you.
basically going to say that, you know, we did.
You're welcome, Kim.
Yeah, response, you know, we tried, we have the public hearing. and
Yes.
We have to vote on this because of state law, so it's not that we're trying to, you know,
Right.
skirt around the towns or not get a response from them.
Yeah. Charlotte?
So so that I'm understanding this correctly, this hasn't changed since the last time that we reviewed it. So we still don't have any funding for things like technology, et cetera.
Correct.
Okay.
So this has not changed since we presented the tentative budget when we moved around revenues that night. What we presented at the public hearing is the same as this one.
Ellen?
That announcement yesterday that was made, that cut that $1 billion of funding for schools to be able to purchase from local farms, which was a COVID era.
Initiative.
Yeah, initiative, thank you. How is that going to affect, is that going to affect us? Did we get any revenue from that?
So
in order to
currently,
buy from local farms?
with that, no, that does not affect us.
No.
Okay.
But I
It
will
doesn't.
say in that same article, they did talk about CEP districts, which we are. So that could be next on the chopping block, but no, as of this moment in time, it has not affected our
And
school lunches.
CEP
So
districts are?
CEP means that, let's see if I'm going to get this acronym right, because I just,
We're just in the last.
Community Eligibility Provision. That really basically, you have to be over a 31.5% low income to qualify. We do qualify, and it basically means that we can provide school lunches and breakfasts over the summer. This will be the first year we will do this. The source is essentially federal funding. There's a SNAP is a component of that as well. But, you know, right now, we're moving forward. We're submitting a letter of intent. We fully intend to do it.
And I will say, one of the things that I read in the article, that it's not so much cutting the CEP status, it'd be increasing that poverty threshold.
Right.
So I don't know if it did change it, how it would, but I know that we met the threshold this year because they lowered it. So.
But it is all of our schools that met the threshold this year, all of our school communities.
I thought it was going up to like 60% or some crazy number like that.
That's what I believe I saw.
Yeah.
Hopefully
We're at
not.
39%.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Can I, just a couple of the numbers. You said there's 600,000 in special ed kind of reserve. There's some money in the bank there.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is circuit breaker reimbursement. That needs to be spent next year. So the way circuit breaker, you have 2 years to spend those funds. The way we budget with them, we have all the funds come in this year, so at the end, we know exactly what the number is. Then we use that for a budget, either through salaries or special ed tuition. So that 600,000, it's not like we could set that aside and save it for the next year. We have to spend that.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, so it seems that the average assessment for the towns has gone up by 3.97%. The actual budget itself has gone up by 2.7%. That confuses me. Since the actual dollars and cents are 2.7 higher, I'm not sure why this variance between the average town assessment and what the actual total budget number is percentage-wise. Can you explain that?
So that is due to, I'm actually bringing something up on my screen right now. That is due to the change in our revenue sources. So we have our grant funds and revolving funds. Those saw a decrease of what we're using from last year to this year. It went down by just under 6%. So our overall costs went down, or went up by 2.7, but where the pockets of money are is shifting. So it's shifting from grants and revolving accounts over to pretty much town assessments.
Where the money came from. Yeah. All right. Dave?
Yep. Thank you. So at the tentative hearing, we held back 262,000, right? And that's 0.8% of the budget, roughly, 0.812, something like that. What else do we have in reserve?
Going into next year, we whatever we have for E&D this year will pretty much be, trying to think. Depends on what we get for rural aid next year, and then what we end with E&D.
Because that rural aid doesn't come in like on a fiscal schedule.
We won't,
like our
we'll
budgets.
know by July if we're receiving rural aid. We won't get our actual allotment, thank you, until October, November.
They said October this year, but
It was late this year.
November.
And then we could, once we get it, we can use it in this fiscal year, or we use it in the following fiscal
We'd
year?
have to use it in that fiscal year.
You have
have
to
to use
use it in the fiscal year that they give it to you.
So we get it in the fall, and we have to use it in FY '26.
By June 30th, that
Yep.
year. That's, so I think the idea is if we, this year we got 1.6. If we get the same next year, we are only using 1.2 of it for salaries. So hopefully if we receive the same, then we could do something like Chromebooks, computers. But it would not fund any of our, what's the word I'm looking for?
Barbara?
Wait.
Reserves, we're not funding our reserves. And one thing I did forget, we do have school choice funds. So we have, I believe by the end of this year, we should have about 1.7.
We put 350.
We put 350 in, and we should see about 200 coming in next year.
So we still have those school
We'll be right
choice
around
funds.
1.5, 1.6, if things continue in school choice the way it is right now. That is our last reserve we have, school choice.
Can I just clarify something with
yeah,
that?
go
So both the school choice and the rural aid, the numbers that we saw in there, we have already been awarded those numbers?
Rural
or
aid? No, we have not been awarded rural aid. It's in the governor's budget.
Right.
We have not seen any, the budget at the state has many different steps. We've only seen the first step so far.
So we're just hoping?
We're
that we
hoping.
get what-
That's what we did.
If we don't get rural aid, we
it's a
do have enough
projection.
school choice to cover those costs
Okay.
next year.
Which is why
But
it's
it would
important.
deplete our school choice fund pretty much, so.
I think that's an important thing just to highlight, that we need to have the reserves in school choice to offset the chance that we don't get rural aid. And if we just, it would be a big gamble to budget for rural aid and not have the school choice funds to back it up.
So actually, if you look at the screen, I'll try to make it as big as possible. This top area is our school choice. So by the end of this year, we should have 1.7. Next year, we're expected to see 1.2 million come in revenue. At the same time, we're seeing about $1 million going out in assessments from the state, and then we're also using that 350. So that's where I'm getting to that number. If everything comes in the way it is, how we should end our school choice next year.
We typically also, just so you know, historically, we've gotten 200,000 a year in school choice. So we're going a little bit beyond what we typically get.
And then E&D, we won't know until the end of this fiscal year.
Right. I am tracking that to be a little, I'm going to say a little right now because I don't want to scare anybody, but than we have seen in the past. One right now is we do have our costs associated with the Wacona project, the issue we had this last summer. But also, we are not going to see a premium holiday this year through our insurance. So all years since I've been in this position, we have seen a premium holiday where employees and the district do not have to pay their June premiums. That saves us close to $400,000. So that is really, that's been kind of feeding our, at the end of the year, our E&D. We're not going to see that this year. So I do expect our E&D to be less next year. And we don't have that $250,000 to start the fund off each year, so we'll be looking for that as well.
If I could, and so finance knows this because I came to your meeting on Thursday. I sent a letter to Paul. I kind of talked about some of these things. The rest of the school committee obviously wasn't there, but I'm concerned with this budget. I know everybody's worked hard on it. I know these are challenging times. We don't know what's coming. We don't, we've got, we're playing hokey pokey with tariffs and what's going to cost us. Is steel going to cost us for the HVAC units for Craneville? How's that going to affect the budget, the capital budget for that? There's so many things that we don't know starting at the federal level. We're seeing consumer confidence decline, which means lower tax receipts on the state level, state and local level. I'm concerned that we're not preparing ourselves enough for a downturn. We have a new superintendent coming in who may have to face some really hard choices in their first budget. And I don't think that's a good position to put a new superintendent in. And again, we don't have any control at the federal level, right? If we don't have any control over Medicare, we don't have any control over SNAP. If those things go, our residents, and we are in a much higher poverty district, they're going to have a much harder time. And I think we have a responsibility to think about them too. These are really hard things, but I am concerned that this doesn't prepare us enough in the event that we do have some of these financial cuts. I mean, we get a lot of federal money. And we already saw half of the staff get cut at the Federal Department of Education. So, and again, we don't have control over this, but I am concerned that our residents, particularly those with the higher poverty rates, are, I think they're scared. I think a lot of us are scared, honestly, about what's actually going to happen. And so I am going to vote against this total budget here. I will vote for the retirees benefits. I will vote for the capital. Those are things that we've already committed to, and I will vote for them. But the final operating, I can't support it. I think we're too vulnerable and just hoping things don't go bad.
You done?
I'm done. Did I miss a word? Do you want to fill me in?
I didn't want to interrupt you.
Please.
Okay. May I speak?
Sure.
I'm doing record.
Yes, I recognize you. Barb?
I just think that there's so many uncertainties. We can't prepare for all of them. We don't know what's going to happen. The Department of Education was slashed in half, but most of the states, 20 states, are sending
Do you need a word?
Thank you. Are suing because of that, so we don't know what the outcome is going to be. So yes, we have to plan for the inevitable, but we have to use what we know now. We can't just be all doom and gloom and worry, and I'm saying that for me more than anybody else, because I am doom and gloom. But I think we have to just do the best we can with what we have. That's my 2 cents.
This is no attacking issue whatsoever, because I'm not as understanding of the budget at all. If you are suggesting that there is a change that should be made to the operating budget, what is your suggestion that we should be changing?
I've not gone through the budget line by line, but this 4% increase to the towns, 2.7's, fairly decent number. I just think that we're not leaving enough in reserve, and we're sort of running thin. And I think it sets us up for the potential. Hopefully it never happens, but I think it puts us kind of on shaky ground if things really go worse. I mean, if we're counting on rural aid and we're seeing, for example, consumer confidence decline, which lowers tax receipts, the state has less money. I'm usually an optimist, but sorry, not with this tonight.
So I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I know this is scary. We're on shaky ground. And I think when we had the meeting where they explained Chapter 70, the presenter did say that the state sort of did something with the calculation to sort of stave off the inflation numbers until later, and so we're going to be feeling those after. So we haven't seen the worst of it. The problem is, where do you cut? $1 million of our expense increase is contractual obligations to the teachers, and then another $150,000 to the substitutes, who we gave an increase in pay to, so we would have substitutes here to teach our students. Do we cut money, the food spending budget, so that we don't have, so we try to hold back money instead of giving our kids proper school lunch? Do we cut the line for snow removal? We live in a northern state. We need heat. We need to take care of our buildings. We need to take care of our plumbing. We need to make sure that the buses are running and that they can get to the buildings in case of a snow emergency. We need to feed our kids. We need to pay our teachers. We need to pay our health insurance. There really isn't, and it's not, we didn't cause the exorbitant increase in our health insurance costs this year, which only added to this. So while I understand what you're saying, there really isn't a place to cut. We're already not giving our kids any new items for technology or replacing any Chromebooks. We're sort of stuck. So if we don't have a budget, we're screwed. And if we could very well be screwed with this budget, but we need some guideline as to how we're going to move forward next year.
Anybody else? Yeah, John.
Yeah, I think we're, as someone who works in municipal government, these conversations are happening all over Western Mass. So it is going to hit the fan at some point, and we got to be prepared for it. But worrying about the unknown and not spending on the unknown is tough. So I definitely feel the plight of the surrounding communities. But we have to provide services, and I don't want to cross our fingers, that's for sure. We don't want to do that, but there will be hard choices, like you say, down the line, definitely. And we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I'll just add, I would love to see higher reserves as well. But I do think that this budget gets us through next year, and as long as we put some strict controls in place and really come up with creative solutions, I'm going to lean on you guys for that, that we should be able to create a pathway where level funding, and we're doing our best to really keep any future costs down until we weather the next few years. That's sort of my position on it.
Okay, yeah, Jake.
Yeah, so one of the things that we discussed in the finance sub was just the projection into FY27. I know it's hard to do to look into the future, but obviously we're dealing with a lot of unknowns federally, but I know, Greg, putting some variables in based on a little bit of speculation, I think we've done a little bit of work for it, or maybe it would help us just to understand where we might be headed, because my concession in the last, when we settled on the move on the budget a little bit, was to put a little bit more back in the reserve, right, in effect. I mean, I don't know, I'm not gonna put words in your mouth, Dave, but I guess what I'm hearing from you is the possibility of having more in reserve might help. So the question is, what do we need? And is that, I don't want to put you on the spot, Greg, but is that anything that you can give us a sense of as we look forward? If we were to assume some reasonable growth to Chapter 70, some continuing rural aid being applied, you've got the school choice money as a backup, you have nothing on E&D now. What are we looking at, you think?
If things continue the way they are and that we don't see cuts to our federal funds, I do think we're going to be okay. I do expect us to get some rural aid next year.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be cut down to zero. Well, the thing that made me most nervous this year with this budget was cutting that E&D, that $250,000. That was our last little place other than school choice that we had. Especially with me kind of having an idea that we're not going to have the E&D that we've had in the past. So seeing that cut, that's going to affect, we have nowhere else to go but school choice now for that. And that's going to hit the town assessments immediately because we're going to be looking for, say, $500,000 right off the bat. If we have everything level funded, if we have 0% in health insurance, 0% in salaries, we're already just looking just to make up for those losses. And $250,000 for the startup and the premium holiday, $400,000.
I mean, typically, the other thing I'm thinking, typically we've had, or we've been able to maintain anywhere between $1 million and 1.5 million in school choice. So we've tried really hard not to touch school choice. We get about, at the end of this year, we'll have 1.7. We did allocate 350 in this budget for that. We get about 200 every year. Every year, I mean, I'm signing a lot of school choice forms, but of course you always have to balance that with, you don't want to create a situation where you need to hire a new teacher and it offsets the advantage. But that's another sort of fund that we've always been able to sort of depend on. So it's going down. I think the big worry would be if we didn't receive rural aid, that would be more my worry is rural aid, we have it as a backup. But if we didn't receive it, if we had to go into that school choice fund, that's our cushion. That's a big cushion for us.
I guess maybe the pointed question would be, if we assume we get 1.6 next year, FY27, does that cover our growth, our expense growth?
Actually, the original projection was 1.7, but we ended up with 1.6 because it's a good question because they readjusted it.
Right.
I guess, I don't know if I can answer that right now because with our biggest pocket of increase being our teacher's contract, which we don't know what it's going to be this year or next year. If we're talking about FY27, I don't know the next 2 years. Depending on where that lands, maybe it would. I don't know.
Okay. And I think we've been fortunate the last few years with school choice, but that hasn't always been the case.
It had, no.
Right, so in the last 3 years have really been our biggest three.
Right. And I will say, because Les and I were looking at the school choice.
Yeah, we're doing all school choice now.
We do.
It's
We do get a lot of
healthy.
school choice we do sign, but there are a lot of kids, especially in Beckett, we never even step foot in our doors. And we don't know that until I get the assessment letter a year later that this is the list for Beckett. So that's the one thing that we keep in mind, that we do have a lot coming in, but there's a lot going out that we don't even see.
Maybe the last thing I'll say is that we have done some transition this year from sort of the grant work onto the operating side. Any more of that next year? I mean, because you sort of, you take a bite at that, right?
Right.
And that you have to take that hit. But then once you have it on operating, you don't have to really deal with that again.
Right. No, I don't think next year we're not expecting any large grants by any means.
No, we've thought about applying for a
Everything's moved
couple.
from grants to operating,
Right.
that is possible at this point.
And I will say, it came up in Hinsdale tonight. One of the things that and I'm going to work on the next couple of weeks, it's very hard in our current budget, if you're looking at the document, comparing line items from year to year. Because when we shift full salaries into a grant one year and the next year we're putting it back in, it looks like that line item is going up by $300,000. The line item is going up, but the funds and the FTEs have always been there, they just have different accounts. So I am going to try to be creative with our budget document and see if there's any way I can, at least, you can see that happening a little better in the budget.
I'll just add a point too. This is highly speculative, so who knows? But there's a lot of negative assumptions, which I think are justified. But there is also the there is also the possibility, or it's a non-zero chance anyways. I think Massachusetts gets somewhere around 9% of its education budget is from the federal government. And from what I understand, if the DOE is dissolved and all those funds are returned to the state would have more than enough to make up that difference. So who knows? I'm not saying it's a good, bad, or otherwise, just that we can pontificate on what could happen, but there's, multiple scenarios, and they're not all terrible, I guess.
Okay. All right. No.
Okay, and I'll add one thing before we do the votes. So this is the budget adoption for the school committee, so this is the one that we send letters out tomorrow to the towns. So we do need a 2/3 majority to approve the budget. So that is 10 members voting on the operating budget, which is number third vote, but we have more than enough here, so hopefully we have 10 passing it.
Okay. Do you want to go through abstentions, why and how?
Well, yeah, I mean, folks who know that you have abstentions on salaries and benefits and things like that, you have to abstain from those votes.
So if you have a conflict, you can abstain on votes 1 and 2. Once those are passed, everybody can vote on number 3.
Okay.
Okay, so final fiscal year 2026 gross salaries and benefits adoption. Whereas at the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee on February 13th, 2025, adopted a tentative gross salaries, contractual salary increases for all employees and active employees insurance benefit budget for the school year 2025 to 2026 in the amount of $21,380,981.
Second.
Motion.
Therefore, be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee adopts a final gross salary, contractual salary increases for all employees, and active employees' insurance benefits budget for the school year 2025 to 26 in the amount of $21,380,981 as recommended by the Finance Subcommittee.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any further discussion on it? Roll call vote, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Abstain.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Ellen Ladazori?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Abstain.
Stephen Morantz?
Yes.
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
What was that, Kimberly?
No.
Yes.
Oh.
No.
Okay, heard you. Motion carries. Next up.
All right, so final fiscal year 2026 retirees benefits adoption. Whereas that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee on February 13th, 2025 adopted a tentative retirees health insurance benefit budget for the school year 2025 to 26 in the amount of $2,352,558. Therefore, be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee adopts a final retirees health insurance benefit budget for the school year 2025 to 2026 in the amount of $2,352,558 as recommended by the Finance Subcommittee.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion on this one? Roll call vote, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Abstain.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Ellen Ladazori?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Morantz?
Yes.
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
Kim?
No.
Okay. Motion carries.
Okay. Final fiscal year 2026 operating budget adoption. Whereas that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee on February 13th, 2025 adopted a tentative gross operating budget for the school year 2025 to 26 in the amount of $32,233,498. Therefore, be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee adopts a final gross operating budget for the school year 2025 to 26 in the amount of $32,233,498 as recommended by the Finance Subcommittee. Be it further resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee adopts a final anticipated revenue budget for fiscal year 2026 in the amount of $32,233,498 as recommended by the Finance Subcommittee.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on this one? Roll call vote, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Yes.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Ellen Ladazori?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Morantz?
Yes.
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
No.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
No.
We have a budget. That motion carries. We have a budget.
All right. Final fiscal year 2026 capital budget adoption. Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee adopts a final capital budget for the school year 2025 to 26 in the amount of $2,393,869 as recommended by the Finance Subcommittee.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions on this one?
I just have a question on, Greg, can you briefly, like, I know we took the ban out from operating because we're going to go for a bond on the school building. Theoretically, that's going to get closed out this year. So that bond is included in this number.
Yep.
But it may not happen if, with all the HVAC stuff and with the school.
So I did
How
speak.
does that work?
I did speak to the auditors and our treasurer, and it's okay at this point to move it into capital. If for some reason that we do not go out for permit bond next year, it's okay, but on all their standards. So
But we're on
But
track
then-
for closing.
we're on track for closing.
Yeah, but then this money can be used for, because then we'd have to get another band, right?
So this money would be used for a band.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Yes.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Ellen Ladazori?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Morantz?
Yes.
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
No.
Motion carries. All right. Anything else then?
That's all I have.
That's it.
That's it.
Thank you for your efforts. Next up is policy.
All right, we met on Tuesday of this week, right here in this very room. And we did complete our review of section E, with the exception, we will return back to one policy on pupil transportation that Greg is going to sort of tweak and bring us a draft back to the next meeting, where we will continue with section F, which is quite short, and then begin our review of section G. That meeting is on April 16th here at Nessacus at 6:30. The other thing that we discussed in that meeting, which we actually discussed during the first part of the meeting, was a policy that Mr. Stewart had brought forward regarding the way in which we incur debt and the voting procedure. We had a lengthy discussion around that and discussed some of the challenges and difficulties around having policy that didn't necessarily align with the regional agreement, and also, questions around whether or not that would be, confusing or misleading to the towns. We discussed that, we do think that it is valuable to put in additional backstops or hurdles either in the regional agreement or in policy stating that we can't switch from, town by town vote to popular vote. But that whatever is reflected in the regional agreement, we think should be reflected similarly in policy, because ultimately the towns are protected by the regional agreement significantly more than they are by policy, which can be easily changed by the school committee itself. So after a lengthy discussion, we feel that it's important to send this back to the regional ad hoc committee to further pursue some options and opportunities there in terms of what may or may not be able to legally be put into that agreement. That's not eliminating the possibility of a popular vote, but makes it clear the steps that have to be taken in a slow and cautious manner to move from town by town to popular vote.
Cool. Any questions or comments on that? So we understand, so basically we're going to try and put language into the regional agreement that the towns would, so in other words, all the towns would have to because we're going to change language in the regional agreement, all the towns have to vote on it again with that language in there.
Yes, but we're hoping that that change in language, one, would be accepted by DESI, and also would put some, safety measures in there to protect the towns, essentially. And
Or let them know. I think the biggest issue is they want advance notice that it's going to happen or something like that.
And I think we feel that it's important. I think we had a long discussion about establishing or reestablishing and maintaining trust with the towns, and that is certainly, I think, something that everyone on the committee cares about and wants to do. But yeah, I think the understanding of how we can change policy fairly easily, and we can't obviously change the regional agreement without the towns getting on board. It seems in their best interest to see if there is a possibility of putting something in the language that doesn't eliminate the option of a popular vote, but makes it clear to the towns how that process would happen, and also, requires us as a committee to go through several steps in order to move from the default method of town by town to popular vote.
Yeah, Liz.
So, as someone who's on the regional agreement ad hoc, there was one discussion about language in this proposed policy that would alert towns if we were looking to use one or change that policy, change our the proposed policy to use a different voting method. Was that brought up? Was that type of language brought up in policy, or was it not?
So the policy, are you saying that the policy?
So
there is no policy now.
Right, no. The proposed one that Dave had sent forward. Did that one have any suggestion of if we are going to change our voting method, we would have to alert the towns? Because that was one thing that was brought up in the regional agreement committee, and I don't know if that was passed along.
I think that makes sense. I think the challenge is that if we put that into the policy itself, and then we decide to change the policy on changing the policy, I think you run into, I don't know, I think we could run into a situation where, I don't think that we would, but you technically could change that policy and then
not tell anyone. Well, not tell anyone beyond this being a public meeting and everyone having the opportunity to know it.
Yes.
Can I think maybe another word of saying that is a advance notice clause, right? And so when this came out of ad hoc, we didn't have that included. We did talk about that, and again, there was no vote taken on any policy for or against creating a policy. So, and I'm going to take that hot potato and talk about some of this in the my ad hoc report from my discussions with the towns. So we'll have another opportunity to discuss these issues.
But hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That is all.
Okay.
Personnel.
Yeah, next up is personnel. So first off, negotiations. We finished the training with the interest-based bargaining leader that came out and met with us on Monday with the two groups, and we actually started. We went through a couple of issues that were put up on the screen and started working on them, debating them. I think the process that we're using was eye-opening to everybody that was involved, especially the folks who had been in negotiations before. The comments were positive from the folks who've been in there before. I have never done one, so to me it was, this is just problem-solving 101 is what we're doing. And it was a very open discussion, both sides, so I don't think it's, I think it's gonna be a decent way to move forward. I guess, we've set the schedule now. We're gonna be meeting every Monday, pretty much every Monday and Wednesday between now and, next year. It's pretty heavy load, so, it's a lot of work to do, but we're starting with the paras and then the teachers after that. So the schedule is to get it done by the end of May, so it's a pretty aggressive schedule, and if it happens, I think it would be kind of a record, maybe. I don't know, from what I hear from people anyway. So, any questions on how that's going, or? Okay. Next up is the superintendent search. So the search committee met and voted to move 4 candidates forward. There was only one candidate that we interviewed 5, and only one was eliminated. 4 have been moved forward to the final committee, the final interviews, which this committee is going to do. It's actually our responsibility, the full committee, to interview these candidates. That will take special meetings. In our brochure that we put out for this, we told the candidates to keep the March 31st week open for interviews. So I'm proposing that we do 2 nights of interviews, 2 candidates a night. And then after the 2 nights, we would have a discussion about the 4 candidates, and then hold a vote on, or have somebody nominate and hold a vote on what candidate we want to offer the position to. So we have to confirm that with the vote to confirm April 2nd and April 3rd. That's a Wednesday and a Thursday of that week. I don't know if there's any issues. It's far enough out. I think we can.
I can't make the 3rd.
You can't make the 3rd. So.
I mean, obviously you're not going to get everyone's schedules perfectly aligned. So.
Right.
Yeah, my only question on what you just explained. You want to finish first? I'll let you finish.
Well, there's a laundry list here, but if we can talk, so I mean, I'll just say that I'll go through everything we need to do, and then we can talk about all bits of it, right? So we need to put together questions, and all the questions will be predetermined, and they're going to be exactly the same for every finalist. Through the entire process, it is an open meeting. These interviews are done in public. So one of the challenges is we really can't have it as a Zoom meeting, because candidates could watch the Zoom meeting and it wouldn't be fair to the other candidates. So, I mean, if there's a chance that somebody couldn't be there and they had to be, we could do a Zoom for an individual person from the committee here, but we wouldn't want them aired public, because it would be unfair to the candidates on the second night being able to see the questions and see how the other candidates perform. So there won't be a Zoom option for that meeting. At the conclusion of the interviews, we'll have a discussion regarding all candidates. A member will make a motion regarding a candidate. Motion to move one candidate forward pending salary negotiations will be the move. The voting process is, it's like I said, it's open meeting. You know, if we, you know, just do a vote, you know, aye or nay. If it sounds like it's close, we could do a roll call vote on that sort of piece. So, yeah. I think, Jake, what was your question?
I have
Or
lots.
concerns?
Yeah. Hey, just, first question would be, when are you proposing we develop the questions? Because you just talked about night 1 and night 2.
Yeah.
And if we're developing the questions in open session, ahead of the first interview, all the candidates would have access to the questions anyways. So we have to develop the questions, I believe, in open session.
Yes, well, yeah, we have to, well, we could publicize the questions ahead of time.
Sure.
I don't know if they have to be done in open session, but we have to, the committee can put questions forward, and that's one of the things that we have to do is,
Okay.
all of us would do, you know, I would ask, we could send out a list of questions, and you could pick your favorites, or you could come up with questions yourselves, but everybody should come up with a couple questions that they like ask. Not everybody will be able to ask those questions. There's 15 of us that might not have enough time to do 15 questions, but yeah, we'll have to develop those questions ahead of time, and those questions will be asked to everybody all at once.
When would we vote to certify the questions on the night of the first interview?
Yes, we could do that night of the first
Okay.
interview.
All right. That's what I guess I'm getting at.
Yep. Yep. Similar to what we did in the search committee process.
Sure, okay. So you would be collecting questions, we wouldn't really be deliberating on the questions, because that would violate open meeting, but.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I guess the second part is, I thought we were gonna do site visits, and tours with candidates, and we've got references to check. So we've got other work to do before we would just take a vote.
I don't think we decided on site visits.
Okay, well, let's talk about it then.
Yeah, we can, I mean, I thought I had that down here, but I missing, maybe I didn't put my glasses on and read, but there are options of site visits. We can do, certainly the site visits internally, we definitely want to have site visits, the candidates coming to us, and we give them tours around, introduce them to the different schools and that sort of thing. So that definitely will happen for the candidates coming in. Going out for site visits is something we can debate, whether we want to do outside site visits. I'd like to hear people's comments on that. We could do them by Zoom if we did outside site visits. We could go to the places, it depends. Well, and we would pick, you know, a couple of people to go on those site visits. And if we decide to do something like that, it's not the whole committee, it's just a few people that would, you know, go to those site visits and then report back to the committee in the interviews. So I don't know if there's people want to comment on site visits. I would say the site visits coming here, they're definitely going to happen. It's the going out site visits, go out and visit the sites of the candidates. You know, that's what is up in question here. Go ahead, Bud.
I have very strong feelings about site visits, having participated in them many times. What I've seen in my experience is the candidate puts together, or the school committee would put together people who are pro that candidate and go visit those people in that school. Let's say it's Pittsfield, just for the sake of argument. We go to Pittsfield, and the candidate would have put together a group of people who are supporters of that candidate. So it's not really an authentic site visit. I call it a performance. I know that I've done that myself when I've been a candidate, a finalist in a school. I've put together my strongest people, and they've spoken on my behalf beautifully. So I'm not so sure that it's an authentic tool to really get a flavor of what that person is in that building. So I think that we have some really strong candidates. I don't feel comfortable doing this in open session. I don't know why.
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, I've been on site visits for a school system that we hired superintendent, and I agree with what you just said. I think it's pretty much a setup of who you're going to see, or to be really skeptical sometimes. If they don't want that person there, they speak so highly of that person because they don't want them there. I think in terms of, I think what we as a school committee might want to do is say, we want references from XYZ people, you know, director of curriculum. We want to pick the people we want to hear from and just ask them to comment. But I'm not so sure the site visit is going to do us a whole lot of good.
Anybody else on site visits? Yeah, Liz?
Just because I don't know the 4 candidates, is there a theoretical possibility that someone would have to do a site visit out to Boston, like far away, like?
They're all in Berkshire County. Yeah, no?
I mean, I don't know what going out there and to do a site visit is going to do. I mean, you think about interviewing candidates for any other position, I don't know that anyone actually goes to a site visit for, you know, like someone who is, you know, running to be you're applying to be a chief operating officer or a CEO or anything of that nature. Usually, you know, the site is just checking references. So I don't think that there's much to really get out of doing a site visit.
Paul?
Personally, I'm pretty neutral on it, but just to sort of counter or provide another perspective, while it could be a stacked group of people that you see, I think you'd still glean some sense of the culture that has been created or the feeling of how the school is run by being there, potentially.
To counter that. Oh, I lost it. Oh dear, what's the word I want? You were talking about that you can glean information about the culture.
Potentially.
Potentially. I think that we can glean a lot of information from all the input that we've had so far. We've had the candidates here, we've interviewed them, we had really good questions, we had really good candidates, we've had some input from other people, and I think that it's just sort of, in my experience, a waste of time going out there because it's this set of performance, and we have the information we need, and I just think it's a futile task.
Anybody else? Yeah, Dave?
To counter your counter, how else would you get information that is not from the source of the person that is trying to get the job?
Letters of recommendations.
Right, so there's your performance. Right, I mean.
That's all positive. You're
And
not
it's
getting a
positive, yeah.
recommendation, negative.
Right, I know, I think we should go and get as much information and do the process. I know it's more work for you all, but I do think we've committed to a full process, and I think we should do that.
I guess I question that as part of the process for 2 reasons. One, if you're calling references, the reference can't tell you that you can't give a bad reference, right? All you can say is, no, I wouldn't hire this person back.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, going on a site visit, I feel is somewhat similar, but on top of that, I also wonder if, you know, I mean, maybe that candidate doesn't necessarily want their work to know that they're applying for this position. And then we put them in an awkward spot where if we don't choose them, you know.
I'll just answer that now because that's coming out tonight. All the names are being released tonight, so publicly, so.
But I don't know. All to say, I think in general, I understand that superintendent searches are slightly different than other hiring processes, but there are certain aspects of hiring that I feel like you just can't get away from the fact that sometimes you're kind of stuck with just what they give you, you know.
Anybody else? Yeah, Rob.
All right. I served on the Western Public Schools for 40 years. All right. As the president of the Western Education Association, I was invited by the school committee on several occasions to do site visits. And our site visits weren't just within the community or state of Massachusetts, they were outside of the state, okay? And it gave us an opportunity to talk to people directly who didn't, first of all, they probably knew we were coming, but they, you know, we could ask any questions of anybody that we saw, from custodian all the way up to the people working in the superintendent's office. And then we came back together, and again, I as the president of the Western Teachers Association, I could only share my thoughts and ideas. The decision was made by the school committee, but they were looking for more input than the input that they got themselves from interviewing the limited number of people that they got to see. And it was an outstanding experience. It was an outstanding experience for the teachers in the Western Public Schools, knowing that they had a representative there to go out there and look at the candidates, okay, who were being recommended to come into our school system. And I'm all for it, okay? Especially when they're all coming from Berkshire County, all right? And you can be there in, you know, an hour to visit all of these schools. It's not like you're going to Syracuse, New York, or you're going down to New Jersey to visit candidates that take you away from the classroom and take you away from whatever you're doing as an individual, okay? Because there are a lot of people on the school committee that, you know, aren't working in the school department. They're doctors, nurses, and regular people, right? So that, I would be for it, okay? And I hope the committee here votes to do that.
Anybody else? Liz?
Not saying that we have to do exactly what's happened in the past, but we did relatively recently have a newer superintendent. For our previous, for the looking for a new superintendent, when Leslie came on, did we do site visits at that time?
It was, I actually, my interview was in my house, and it was COVID, and everything was shut down.
I think Leslie was our only applicant.
So it was you know, you really couldn't, schools were closed down at that time, so it was a very different situation.
Well, then, previous to that, did we do site visits previous to that?
I don't know.
Lori?
Mr. Locatell?
I don't ever remember doing a site visit for this.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I mean, obviously I support it. I think it just helps. We've run a good process. We had a great committee with a lot of really good input. I think we follow through and just be as diligent as we can. It's so difficult, in my opinion, to hire someone with a 1-hour interview and, you know, a little bit of a coffee visit. So I'm not saying that this is ever perfect, but it seems to me that we should spend the time. There could be a compromise position here, and that could be that we interview 4 candidates, but don't necessarily do site visits on all of them. So I'm not suggesting that that's where we should go, but we could decide that there's 2 that we feel very strongly about, and we want to follow through on the site visits for those 2. But I think for us to divide up in teams of 2 and to go out and then bring back that feedback to the group, I think would be helpful.
Okay. Anybody else online have comments? Okay.
I just want to say that because they're all Berkshire County candidates, and because many of us know them, we've had a lot of input, and we've had a lot of discussions about the candidates, much of which, you know, you've shared with us your experience with each candidate, and I value that. I'm just not so sure that going out there and having the stage performance is going to give us the information we need.
Yeah.
So I definitely understand your point in the stage performances 100%, and I think that's absolutely what we would be getting when we go out. However, I think that there's a lot of that we can pick up on by, you know, what they're not planning to show us. There's just a lot you can see when you're kind of observing and watching things that maybe it's not the show, but you're seeing how is the door being held open. Just little things that how they interact with their staff. But I do 100% see what you're saying.
So I'm seeing kind of a divided piece here, so why don't we take a vote on this? I want to say, do a roll call vote on doing site visits.
Someone has to make a motion.
Somebody make a motion to do site visits. External site visits, going out to, sending a couple of people, and we designate a couple of people to go out to each site. MASC recommends that this be done the day of the interviews. So while the candidates are here, the folks go out for site visits. So we'd have to have a team of folks ready to go to 3 places. So that would be 6 people we would need going out to do site visits on those days. So that's what MASC suggested. I don't know, maybe Jake, in your past, could they go a different day?
My
or?
experience is the opposite. Sorry, I mean, it's just, this is my experience, but again, it doesn't make it right. Is that we typically lined up the interviews on a day in which the candidate was coming to us for their visit in district. Candidate comes, they spend half the day, 2/3 of the day going between buildings, having an opportunity to meet with parents, then they get interviewed by the committee that night. So,
right.
You know, I mean, that means it's 4 nights. It's a lot of work, but that's how I've seen it done. And then the visits out typically happen completely separate from that.
Did they happen before or after?
I think in the Lennox it happened after. So they deliberated the candidates and the interview. Actually, I think they just did the interviews and then sent the teams out, and then they had one additional special meeting which they deliberated and took the vote. I know it's all.
So is there a chance that if we did the interviews, and then after the interviews, we could take a vote on going out to site visit if necessary?
We could, certainly, that's an option.
So why don't we do that instead?
Can you
If
repeat
that-
that, please?
If we hold the interviews, and if we feel like we need to do site visits to get a better answer, we vote to go out at that time, in open session, we vote to go out to do site visits instead of doing it ahead of time. I mean, that he's had that experience doing that in the past, so I think that's a great idea because, I mean, we would, if anything, you know, we might not have to do 4, right? You know, maybe you take your top 2 or whatever, right? So that would be an easier piece. And you're saying we do it on a subsequent day. That's another meeting, basically.
Yeah, listen, I'm not, I don't want to over-advise because I think we have to decide as a group what makes sense for us.
Yeah.
And we do have 4, and that's a bigger number than in some searches,
Yes.
right? So it's a little bit more work for sure. But I think we're going to do site visits out. We should probably commit to it now. Whether we're going to have a sub-finalist group is maybe the thing you're talking about, which is we do the 4 interviews, and then we make a decision that here's our 2 strong candidates. Let's spend a little bit more time.
No, I would say is if from there we say, hey, we need more information because we're not settled on these 2 candidates, then we say, okay, you know, I'm not saying we come up with a subgroup, we should select that, but I'm just saying at that point we decide to go out. I mean, that's what you said happened, but maybe that was planned to happen.
You definitely have to vote on these 2 if you're going to have.
Yeah, I know that.
Mr. Frontier.
What's that?
Well, Rich, just for clarification, okay? You've got 4 candidates. You were gonna whittle it down to 2. That's what I thought you said.
I said if
Well,
that happened.
the word I'm using is a bad word, but
yeah.
Go ahead. It's.
I said if it happened where you said, oh, we need more information.
In other words, and the 2 final candidates, those are the ones you actually go out to interview, okay? In our case, we used to do 3 because we had multiple more candidates than what you're getting here. You've got 2, there's the 2 top candidates. You basically go out there and you do an interview on them on site, and you see what remember these guys are interviewing for the position of superintendent, okay? And you want to see how they've been performing in that role in the school department that they're working in. And I don't know whether any of these candidates come from from a regional school district, okay? You know, they may be operating, or I can't answer the question because I don't know the candidates and I don't know where they're from. I'll know that soon enough, all right? So I can't really say, but if they're, if they've got background in regional school districts, and there are plenty of regional school districts in Berkshire County, and if they're coming from that you're gonna have a better perspective on seeing how they operated that district and for how many years. You've got more information than I can process right now because I don't have any of that.
Yeah.
All right?
So why don't we do this? Why don't we vote on doing site visits? Let's have an up and down vote on site visits, whether we're gonna go outside for site visits, so I can find out whether or not the majority of the committee wants to go out and do site visits. And then we can just end it at that. That'll be an easy way of doing it. Because I think, we can't do a subgroup and then do another one. We're gonna pick those two. So let's have a vote on, can I get a motion to say, we want to go out for site visits?
Fine, I'll make that motion.
Can we get a second?
Second.
So in other words, a positive vote is you want to go out for site visits. So roll call vote, please. Everybody understand that?
Liz has a question.
Just to clarify, this is not dependent on before or after, this is just yes or no?
If we're going to do site visits, I'm going to say we're going to do them either the day of or before.
Right.
And for all 4 candidates.
And for all 4 candidates. Yes, you can't do one versus another. Yeah.
Right.
So a positive vote says you want to do this. So roll call vote, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
No.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Yes.
Todd Emerson?
Abstain.
Mr. Farella?
No.
Ellen Latazori?
No.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
No.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Morantz?
No.
Rich Peters?
No.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
She left the meeting.
Okay.
It is.
I would vote yes.
It's a tie. It's a tie. All right, okay, and ties.
You would break the tie.
Okay.
I made the time.
Pick the tallest straw.
So
Okay.
I'll just throw out there, I would vote yes if it was a little more structured and not just like all 4 to just do. I'd rather it be like as a committee, we decide, yes, on this candidate, we do want to go do a site visit. To have that extra step in there.
Yeah, I think you have to just take another vote. I think so.
So,
I mean,
well, let's do this. Let's vote on the days, April 2nd and 3rd. We need a vote. I need a motion to do the interviews on the 2nd and 3rd. Can I get a motion for that?
Can you specify times before?
Well, there would be tours during the day, and then we would do evenings, probably either maybe 5 to 7, something like what we did with the search committee. Yeah. So can I get a motion to use April 2nd and 3rd as the dates to do the interviews?
So moved.
Get a second.
Second.
Roll call vote for that, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
No.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Ellen Latazori?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Morantz?
Yes.
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Weatherall?
Okay, so when I talk about the candidates, who they are and where they're located, and whether or not to, I don't need to do that in executive session because we're publicly putting them out there now, so. I can tell you who the candidates are in the districts they're from. We got their resumes.
I'll hand those out while you're talking.
So we'll hand out the resumes. There are, one of the candidates is in a, not a regional district, but a union district of elementary schools, and the others are not in regional districts. They're in North Adams and Pittsfield. Right. North Adams and Pittsfield, and one in Central Berkshire.
Hey, Mike.
Who wants to do that site visit? So I say let's take, let's take some time, give you like 5-10 minutes to look at the candidates' resumes, and then we can revisit the site visit.
He's the only candidate going forward.
But he's still here. He's still there.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe they'll open it. I'm like panicking away.
Well, it's the same, 1.5. More advanced than 2
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike. Dalton. I think so. Maybe we can vote on who to go on to. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if they know who the candidates are. Yeah. Yep.
I know. You're next, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not bad.
Right. Did you send an email to those guys? The online folks?
Divided.
Well, it's just, who's online now? Just Steve and...
I can scan myself and send it to them.
I have them too.
No, but no, they're not just the resumes.
Yeah.
What is going to happen next?
So I think we'll take another vote and see if we want to go, and then we can vote on, because it was a tie. If we want to not go to, what ones we want to site visit to, right? Yeah. Well, I'm gonna take volunteers if people want to go out on site visits, because we're gonna have to divide the conquer here.
Not everybody can go to Central Berkshire.
So who's on this?
Everybody didn't go on. Steve's online.
Yeah, who else is online?
Kim was.
She was. And that's it, right?
Yeah,
Steve?
Just the
out.
town.
Yeah, I know Ruth is out, but
Yeah.
Steve is the only one left online.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, Steve, obviously you're not here to get the resumes. Are you there, Steve?
Yes,
So.
yes, I am.
Okay, so Beth is trying to get a copy of them she scan and just send it to you in email, but just for your information, before we move on, we have 4 candidates. One is internal, Mr. Michael Hinault, who's sitting 2 seats away from me. So that's an easy site visit. The other candidates are John Franzoni, who is up in the student union up in North County, in small towns doing the elementary and middle school up in Rowe and Clarksburg, yeah.
Florida, Monroe.
In Savoy, yeah. Bunch of small towns, small elementary schools. That's a challenging piece of work for sure. And then the other candidate, Tim Callahan, is the assistant superintendent at North Adams Public Schools. And then Matt Bishop is an assistant in Pittsfield Public Schools.
An interim assistant.
Interim assistant, Pittsfield Public Schools. So those are the 4 candidates that are out there. So there's Pittsfield, North Adams, and a student union school district.
Okay, well, I can come pick up the resumes at the office tomorrow if need be.
Yeah, just gonna email them right now.
I'm just waiting for him to come to my computer.
So I would say let's do another vote for going on site visits, because we had a tie. Now that you've seen who the candidates are and whether you think we should go out for site visits or not, we'll do another vote. So roll call vote, please.
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
No.
Charlotte Crane?
No.
Dr. Eberwein?
Yes.
Todd Emerson?
No.
Mr. Farella?
No.
Ellen Ledesori?
No.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
No.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Morantz?
No.
Rich Peters?
No.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
No.
Kimberly Weatherall?
She's not on the
So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 yeses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 noes.
So that's 9 noes and 4 yeses on site visits. So we won't go outside for site visits. You will get, it's part of the personnel files, you will get letters and recommendations for them that were sent in, but I'm told they are part of personnel files, so they're not to be shared outside of, I can give them to the school committee, but they can't go external. Okay, so we voted on April 2nd and 3rd as the dates. The process, other pieces of the process, how it's going to go. As I mentioned, after we have the interviews, we'll do two interviews one night, 2 interviews the next night. Then we'll have a debate and a motion to move one candidate forward, and we can vote on that at that meeting. This is all an open session. We have to develop the questions. Again, these are open meetings, so there really isn't going to be no audience participation after opening comments. The school committee members to be cognizant that all discussions are recorded and there's to be no sidebar conversations during that. The questions will be set up ahead of time, and those questions are going to be the same for the 4 candidates. You can, as we ask those questions, you can ask follow-up questions on that specific question, but not introduce new questions. I don't know if there's any other questions about this. So, I think we're good. Liz?
Just to be clear, it's 2 nights of interviews, and on the end of the second night, we'll be voting on our preferred number 1 candidate.
Yes. Yeah. For sure.
And we don't feel that there's any challenges having 2 candidates one night and then 2 more the next night, and there not be preference to the latter candidates that happen on a different night?
That's why we won't have a Zoom option, so the candidates, I mean, it's a public meeting, they could come to it, but that would be...
I'm talking about bias from ourselves, as
Oh.
most recent to 24 hours later, not necessarily.
Right. I think it's, I mean, we just went through it with the search committee. I didn't see a challenge there. We have rubrics that you can track the answers to the questions. We have this debate after the 2 candidates, and we have a debate about them, and talk about them while it's fresh in our minds, and then we go to the next night. And we could randomly pick who's on what night as a way of making sure it's fair, you know. With 4 candidates. The one candidate, Mr. Callahan, is the only candidate for the North Adams Public Schools superintendency, but he still said he wants to interview with us. So I don't know that. Maybe he'll back out before then, I have no idea. But anyways, just throwing that out there. So it's out in the news out there, so. Yeah, so after the 2 nights, we'll debate the 4 of them and vote for a candidate to be the superintendent. Okay? Any other questions, comments, concerns?
What's the process for reference checking?
So MASC does the background checks for us using their tech assistants, and they've done that for these candidates already.
And background checks, reference checks.
Oh, yeah, the same thing, they do the same, but all of these folks are licensed.
I understand that, Rich.
So they have been fingerprinted, they've done Corey, Story, and all those particular pieces that we, you know, criminal records, that sort of thing.
I understand that, Rich, that's not what I'm asking.
Okay. Sorry.
What I'm asking is that the candidates gave us letters of reference.
Yeah.
We have those in the packets, and then they give us additionally references to contact.
Yeah.
So are we contacting those references, or no?
We can, yeah. I mean, MASC is the one who does that follow-up work. That's what we got the tech assistants for, and we have been relying on them for that.
I don't know why they would be doing reference checks. I mean, we have to be the informed party to talk to each other about what we're hearing.
Yeah.
I don't know that they could translate a conversation. So I think we should be doing reference checks, or somebody should be assigned to doing reference checks here.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's fairly standard. You don't check reference.
Yeah. So in the past, I mean, do we assign a few folks to do that, or?
Doing the site visits, yeah, you have a couple people probably doing the reference checks together. You know, you could do it that way if you wanted to, and they can report back to the full committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we take that in personnel and do that in personnel subcommittee?
Yep. I'm also going to propose something. I guess I can make a motion, but I agreed with Steve on a comment he made much earlier in the meeting in this discussion, which was the ability to contact references that aren't on the list and getting permission from the candidates to do that. So if someone, for example, we don't have a reference from a direct supervisor that they worked for recently, that we have the ability to do that reference check. And we do need to get permission from the candidates to do that, my understanding. And I would think that that would be a smart move on our side, to have that flexibility and that ability to do that, if we decided to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not opposed to it at all. I'm just, again, I mean, in my experience doing interviews, not, you know, in the work world, we always call the references, that sort of thing, you know, in your interviews, but this is a whole different process for me, so I appreciate the guidance and the input, so, yeah, let's do that. We'll do that in personnel, we'll have a personnel meeting, we'll schedule one and get together and do that. Any other, Charles?
Yeah, I'm still a little bit confused with our plan on developing questions or deciding on questions.
Yeah.
This is a great group of people, but also I highly doubt that we would be able to, in a timely manner, come to a decision on, you know, cut a set of questions down to what we're looking for right before our first interview. I would think that it would make sense to hold like an executive session on a separate night and develop those questions.
So, one, the questions have to be in public.
To ask the questions, yes, but to develop the questions, they don't have to be in public.
No, I think they do.
In order to consider and interview applicants for employment, right, if you're developing your questions for that, you should be able to do that in executive session.
So what, the process we used for the search committee, which the questions had to be approved in open session. Well, the way we do that is, like, we sent out a list of questions, and I asked people the search committee to pick their top 2 or 3 questions, not in each category.
Sorry.
Top 2 and 3 questions from a list that's a pretty broad list that MASC provides, plus others folks. And then you take those questions and we rank those and compile about a dozen questions for an hour interview that we would then ask. So like if people sent in, you know, from that list, there'd be multiple, yeah, I like this one, I like that one. You know, it's kind of like voting on it, and we would compile that list of a dozen questions from the list. And then when I would send that out to the team that get compiled, send it out to the committee, and then we would approve those questions at the meeting before the interviews.
I guess what I'm saying, what happens if we don't approve those questions?
We can strike some or add some others. It's a discussion we can have at that time. But ahead of time, we can develop the list ahead of time, and I can get it back out to you folks as a here's what the list transpired, and then when we come to the committee, we can agree on this.
You know, we have a superintendent's evaluation, and there are like 4 major topics. I think the question should be part of those major topics. They should reflect how we're going to evaluate them ultimately. So can we use that?
Yeah, I mean,
as a guideline?
People can submit the questions. We can send out questions that are, you know, out there, but you can submit your own questions. And also, just like we did in the search committee, what I asked folks to do, and this is what MASC suggested, was if you felt passionate about it and you wanted to ask a question, you would say, I would like to ask this question. And you could be on, because there's 15 of us, we have, you know, if there's only 12 questions, not everybody gets to ask a question. But it's not me asking the questions, it's other folks asking the questions. So if you want to ask a question, if you want to develop a question, submit it, that's fine too. And then we pick from that list. So, I don't know. Does that sound reasonable? I mean, we just went through with the search committee, the superintendent search committee. That's the process we followed. I mean, it seemed to work okay. So I don't know. Any objections to that? Jake, do you have any comments about that?
No, I don't. It's tricky. You know, when the rules changed and all this had to be done in open session, made it harder.
Yeah.
You know, the only other thing I've seen groups do is to deliberate on the questions ahead of the interviews and actually give them to the candidates ahead of time. So everyone gets the questions. And it doesn't, I have to be honest with you, it doesn't make it any easier for the candidates. In some ways it's harder.
Yeah. No one had
because you have to really then think, you know, sometimes it's better to think on your feet, be natural. So
Well,
anyways.
we do have the possibility of the March 27th meeting. We have it scheduled, and it's typically scheduled and something happens with the budget vote, but we passed the budget vote, so we don't need to have that meeting, but we could have that meeting on the 27th to basically develop, you know, debate the questions that are put forward, that people put forward, and pick those. If the committee wants to do that, we could do it then. What do we think?
I think that's a reasonable suggestion.
Yeah?
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, guys game for that? It's kind of a, I don't think we need a vote, we can just keep that committee, we can keep that date open for a school committee, and at that agenda will be develop the questions for the superintendent search.
Do you want us to send you questions ahead of time?
Sure, yep.
Personnel committee?
Well, I'll send out a list, and you can either pick from that list or develop your own questions, and then I'll compile them and send them out to the committee before the 27th, so you have time to look at them. Okay?
And then we would be sending those out to the candidates.
No.
No.
Oh, we're not, okay.
No.
Give it to them, Linnea. before they come in, so they can read them over and get an idea, right?
Right, yeah, they don't say, I mean, we have to do it in open meeting.
So they're
but-
gonna know it anyway.
Well, they could if
Or they
they.
could know it
Right,
anyway,
yeah.
they could know it in advance.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the weird.
Well, if we vote on it, then we should just, if we approve them at that point, then we should just
Well,
send it out.
my guess
with
is
that.
we're not going to be reading every question out. We're going to look at the list and go, okay, yeah, we agree with this one, we agree with that one, if we want to add one or two, so. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's an open meeting, and they have to be developed in open meeting, so I don't think we have a choice.
So
I
then
mean-
why not just, if we're developing them in open meeting, why not email them out to the candidates ahead of time? I mean, then, otherwise, one candidate could feasibly,
Yeah.
be watching the playback and get all the questions.
I'll have to ask Liz that.
Sit at the table.
Sit at the table. I know, Jake, you're nodding your head yes, you send it out ahead of time?
No, candidates, they'll watch, for sure.
Yeah.
Or their brothers will watch, or their spouses will watch, or someone will watch. They'll have the question. So I think if you want to just be balanced, send them all the questions.
Yes.
And they all get it.
I'll have to ask MASC about that. I mean, it seems kind of odd to me, but I guess you could do that. Yeah, all right. I'll ask her before that, and we'll have that information on the 27th. Sorry. It's not something we do every day, I apologize.
Can I have one thing that I need to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
About this. I have some concerns about the process, specifically the integrity of the process. And I want to, and I feel like I need to bring this up because we're sitting here pretending like we didn't know who the candidates were until we got our pamphlet. And Mike, I want to say to you directly, I find you to be an honest and person of integrity and somebody who respects process and order of things. But in case anybody hadn't noticed, we've received 3 letters of support from Mike. Okay. Tonight is the night that candidates were revealed to us. So if you go back to a letter from Beckett, Washington, which is dated February 12th, which is 9 days before applications were closed. We received that on March 7th, last Friday. We received a letter from Greg, an email from Greg, dated on the 12th, which is signed by a bunch of principals, assistant principals, deans of students, administrative staff. Right, thank you. That is, thank you for the word. That is dated March 10th. We received a letter dated March 12th, received March 12th, and that was from Kittredge. Also, a letter of support for Mike. The one thing is, I will say, people like you. And that's a good thing.
I will say I've been very open about my desire to work here, and I think it was everybody knew that I was applying for this position, for sure.
And then some of these were forwarded by Rich, by the chair of the search committee, to the full committee ahead of time before, again. So as far as like the integrity of the process, I have some concerns. I know, Rich, you've talked about publicly having a strong internal candidate before the process even began. And so I have some concerns that yeah, I mean, there's members in the school that are sending us letters of support when they don't even know who the other candidates are. Maybe it wouldn't change that, but if we're running a supposedly confidential process until it becomes public, I'm just concerned that, even before applications are closed, staff know and there's, a letter in the copy room that staff can sign as a letter of support, I think it taints the process, I'll be honest. And I don't think it looks good. This is the second most important thing we do. The other one was the budget. And so I do need to voice that concern that, we're not doing candidates. We said we'd do a full search. We're, not going to site visits. We're, I don't know what we're doing, but I don't like the way that looks, that we're getting this information that's not public yet.
So let me just answer that piece there. All those emails came in just in the last few days to me, and I probably shouldn't have sent them out until tonight. And because of what you just said, you will get the letters of recommendations from for the other candidates that were sent in. That is part of the personnel file. Those I sent out because they were internal. One went outside of me, it went to everybody, but then
They all came to everybody.
well, after it came to me.
No, they all
No,
came
they
to
all came
everybody.
to
You double sent them to us.
Oh, I didn't
We all
realize
got
that.
them, and then, yeah, because it was all BC, blind carbon copy. Came
I
to
didn't
you, and then
know.
blind carbon copy to everybody else.
Okay, so I didn't realize that. When I sent it out, I know Jake commented, well, you probably shouldn't have sent it out before the meeting tonight. And I was like, yeah, good point, I mean, but it wasn't like I was revealing anything anybody didn't know, that Mike was a candidate, right? So that's why I was like, okay, everybody knows Mike's a candidate. They don't know the other people, but everybody knows Mike's a candidate.
And I publicly announced my candidacy before the search, just to make that clear. And I announced to our administrative team and our district leadership team that I was applying for the position and was offered support throughout the process. So I actually haven't even looked at those letters, to be honest, but
Yeah.
You're well liked. And I didn't know about some of them, but I publicly announced my candidacy before I even interviewed, well before that, when I was intending to apply probably in December, or February, or January rather. And so it was, I talked to everybody, and I work with the whole district every day, so it wasn't a secret that I was a candidate, and I don't know, and people obviously were supporting that, but there was no, I don't think there was any, I think you would have received those letters whether I was moved forward as a finalist or not, and I had announced my candidacy publicly before then.
So,
yeah.
And I guess I forgot about that, but that's why when I sent it out and Jake said, he kind of corresponded with me, and I was like, yeah, you're probably right, I should have waited till tonight. But to Mike's point, it's been out there forever, so I don't think the fact that you got them, I don't know that that's any kind of, I want to say, lack of transparency thing. I don't know we're not hiding anything. I don't know what you're worried about here. And then the integrity of the process, we've gone through the process that MASC steps out. We've stepped through every piece of it all the way. The site visits is the first thing that we decided not to do that MASC has recommended. So I'm not sure. We're going through a full search committee when we, full search process, and the committee decided to do a full search process, and that's what we've done. There's no law to do site visits. That's something we get to decide on.
Right.
And we decided not to, so that's not half-ass process, that's a real process.
And Rich, just to be clear, the people on the committee, and I'm not talking about me or Jake, I'm talking about the other people, the parents who are on the committee, they universally told us what a great job we did in being transparent and being thorough. They applauded the process. So I'm just throwing that out there as the truth. That's how they're perceiving it.
I've had a parent reach out to me separately also saying the same thing, just knowing that I'm on the school committee, wanting to reach out to say that, how transparent and how well they thought this process has been. And the other piece I would say is, I think that if staff and administration want to send letters of recommendation, the second they hear a mumble of who might be coming in, that's their right, and they should. Their voices should be heard.
Thanks.
To the idea that not having external site visits would be to our detriment. I probably should have brought this up before we were voting on it, but my opinion on that and the reason why I voted no for it is because previously knowing that Mike Connaught would be one of the candidates, that already kind of allows us to give him an advantage. I mean, there was about 5 people who went on school tours with Dr. Connaught on the tour with us. So we'd be doing a second one of our own school district, and that just didn't feel like that would be fair if we already know our own school district and then try to look at other school districts too and try to compare them to our own school district. That was my reasoning for voting no, but I think that is a valid point when saying that we shouldn't, or that we should be doing those as a full evaluation of all our candidates.
Thank you.
Any other points?
I said my piece.
Okay.
Moving on.
All right, I think we're done with personnel, safety and wellness.
Longest personnel ever.
Yeah.
Safety and wellness,
Did you
okay.
forget where we were?
Thankfully, about half of it has been covered by Leslie already. So we met this past Monday, and we did not receive a district health update from Kelly Jean Gallagher. She was unable to attend a meeting, but Leslie reported that illness levels are improved after winter break, and they're generally lower than they had been before that. Secondarily, she already had talked about the district poverty level, and we discussed how that related to summer meal programs and the backpack project. Specifically for the summer meal programs, this program that we have become eligible for provides free breakfast and lunch for school-age district students during the summertime. And the district is reimbursed for providing these meals and giving support through the bread project. The district is able to select locations for distributing these meals. They don't have to necessarily happen at each of the schools. It really depends on where would be best suited for our populations that need the most help. So one of the recommendations I was given was possibly at the CRA, or because there's no schools out in Windsor or Cummington, maybe somewhere in those in one of those towns. Because this is a drop-in program, we may also provide meals for families that are outside of the 7-member towns, and they stop in, and the district will still be reimbursed for those meals. The district's begun planning for the program, and will be sending a letter of intent to accept it on April 1st. At that point, we're not sure if they're going to have to reapply for it every year, but at this point, given that it's the first time that they've qualified for this, the state will send a message early in the calendar year to alert the district that the poverty level exceeds the qualifying level for the state for the program. And the communications will be sent to through district outreach channels, so like the superintendent's report, as well as to towns directly. In addition, we also discussed the backpack program, which provides local children with backpacks had originally provided them with backpacks full of food for the weekend. However, at this point, we're doing gift cards to Market 32 with some stipulations of how they can be used. At this point, there are 130 families across the district who participate, and this is the highest number of families participating since the beginning of the program. There was a suggestion that we switch the gift cards from Market 32 to Aldi to kind of stretch that budget a little bit, and there's going to be some looking into that. Secondarily, we had a discussion about the state guidance for DEIB, and Leslie brought that up already, and we already discussed the statement that came forward. And I think that's it. It was a long one. So our next meeting will be April 28th at 7 o'clock via Zoom, hopefully. where we'll look at a combination of topics at that point.
Okay, Paul?
Just a quick question. Do you know what the percentage is for our district of poverty?
So our percentage was 39 something.
39%.
The level is 31.25.
31.5.
Can we just clarify that? That's not poverty.
It's the percentage of.
If that was poverty.
It's determined by SNAP.
It's SNAP.
It's what?
It's determined by SNAP.
Yeah, right, so it's a series of.
They take like a median
Yeah.
salary.
Just to be
Right,
clear,
right,
it's
so
not
it's,
poverty.
so it's more
Sorry.
complex, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
You're right.
Yep.
Our poverty rate is around 10%.
It's the
Okay.
number of identified students that would be in that percentage.
All right, any other questions for Liz? Okay, thanks. Next up, we're going to regional project. We're happy to report that all the paperwork has been submitted to MASB to close the project. We have 2 opportunities to close before August. There's a meeting in June, and then, so we're set to be hopefully closed either June or August, one of those 2 meetings. With respect to the HVAC piece, the work is just about complete, but we haven't got all the bills compiled yet, and at that point, we'll send a letter to Bar and Bar, and hopefully their insurance will reimburse some of what we have. We're gonna do it from us first and see what recompensation we can get from them on that piece there. Any questions?
Does it make sense to like CC MASB?
No, no.
Or
MASB
get them involved in that process?
No, they don't want to be in any part of any kind of controversy or anything like that. They just keep an arm's length on that sort of thing, so.
But just to
They are
clarify too,
aware of it.
Skanska has been communicating with them.
They are aware
So
of the
they're
situation.
aware of everything we've done.
But yeah, they don't want to get between us, so. Regional ad hoc.
On the Wacona project, were we going to recertify systems, parts of systems, the whole building? How is that going to work?
So we're not going to do a full recommission. Thank you for the word.
Thank you.
Pass around here. Everybody's getting a part of that. We're not doing a full. There was really not a need to do that, but we are going to make sure that we're going to do kind of not a recommission, but a check of the systems that were repaired and make sure that to ensure that the alarm systems are working, all the systems are working appropriately. Instead of doing a commissioning report, we're going to do just basically a audit of the work that was done to make sure it's working properly. Through our buildings and grounds. Yeah. Functional test, yeah. Yeah.
Right, and the HVAC was already commissioned, like, we already had a commissioning report.
Yes.
Before we found out that the HVAC failed.
Yes.
So we're hoping that nothing else was missed.
Well, I mean, you could, it's an expensive endeavor, and there was a chance that MASB was going to do recommissioning for some schools, and we might have been on that list, but I don't think we're on that list. We didn't get on it, so.
Your project has to be closed out.
Right, that's right. So we're not going to fund a full recommissioning. We didn't feel like we needed to do a full recommissioning. We asked the commissioning agent who did the commissioning, and I actually haven't heard back from Skanska on that, but we said, does he want to come clean on and do a recommissioning of that area that he clearly didn't do a thorough job on, and hopefully he'll come back and do that gratis. If not, we can hire somebody to come and do a piece of it, or we could do it through the contractors that are doing it and our buildings and grounds person.
And somebody has to commission it before MASB can sign off.
No.
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 No,
They're
it doesn't have to be
separate.
recommissioned, no. Yeah, it's basically a fault, and we just have to repair it. And we could, like I said, that part of it, we could look at doing a piece of that with the commission meeting. But yeah, we didn't get on that list, and we decided not to do a full commissioning of the whole school.
Okay. Regional Agreement Ad Hoc. RAC has been on the road, taking a tour of the county here. All right, so we met on January 16th and February 10th with the RAC committee, and we kind of gave an update of where we were, where we are. A lot of the discussion there was, as Charlotte said, a lot of this is about debt, which is about popular vote, town by town vote. These are a lot of the issues that are remaining, and really how to go forward. Where we are, in case anybody needs a reminder, is that 3 towns voted it down, and we need 2 of them to vote for the regional agreement for that to come into being. Cummington did have some additional concerns other than the voting stuff, and that was one of the things that they would like to know is if they pre-fund the OPEB for withdrawal, if that could be refunded, if single payer, if there's any, state single payer programs, if they could be refunded for some of their retirements that they pre-fund. Don't know. Beckett at that meeting, one of the things that they talked about, and this is a much bigger topic that I think the school committee as a whole should talk about once we get through these budgets and everything else, is what they had asked for is, how do you let us know something's important? If there's, like we talked about, if there's a change in policy that affects the regional agreement and voting and debt and everything else, if there is a policy, how do you put, big red letters, 12-point print, so that select boards know what we're doing, right? And I said, well, Jeff, you read all of our agendas, right? And we don't read their agenda. I don't read their agendas, every single town's agenda. I don't know what's going on. They don't read all of ours, right? So at some point, again, I would like to have a conversation about how do we improve this communication with the towns and highlight the things that are important so that that happens. I know we send lots of stuff out, so that was something. So yeah, I've been on tour. Cummington, February 27th. I was not here for the public hearing on the budget. Cummington did talk about the impact closing their school had on the town. And that, 10 years later, they were preparing to have a state delegation. They'd received $1 million in one-stop funds for rehabbing the old building. And it's really taken them 10 years to get that money and to do something with it. They had, Brian Gilman did say that, they wish they had a say in how a district decides to close a school in a town. That is something that's not in the regional agreement. I don't even know if it's possible by law. But they did say, they said, what if the Beckett school closes? What if another school closes? And they don't have a say in this, right? It sort of goes to a warning for them, for the other towns, and they did talk about some population shifts because that school closed, and the culture shift in the town because that school closed. So hopefully they can do something with the building. They do hope that maybe one day they could have a preschool there. So there was some, because our regional agreement has us as a pre-K through 12, so there was some, not really sure how that would work out. And let's see, March 5th, I was in Beckett, and we talked about, again, debt. Talked about how that happens, again, if there's a policy and it doesn't fully align with the regional agreement, and how do towns know if you change a policy and what the process is, and how to really be clear on that. Dalton was March 10th. Select Board member John Boyle said that he would prefer to have the popular vote. I did get an email from a former resident talking about that as well. Rich was copied on that. And so we were there, Hinsdale, back in Hinsdale yesterday, and again today for the finance meeting. Rich was there, Viv Mason, former select board member for Hinsdale, and she's on the ad hoc committee. Kim Wetherill, she was there for the meeting. We had a good, I think we had a good discussion, a couple hours worth. And so I'll just say that, you know, what I've done in all these towns is I've given a background kind of on where we've been, where we're at, some of the remaining issues. I've thrown out, floated some possibilities that I've been really clear to state are things that I've suggested. Nothing, the school committee has not endorsed anything. We talked about it in policy. We haven't taken a vote on anything. I don't know what to call it, executive summary addendum forward to the regional agreement that I wrote that is in your packet, that Dick Locatell referenced tonight. I do want to say it's a concept. There are lots of issues, I shouldn't say issues, there are a lot of concerns that the towns have that I don't want to write a novel here. The point of this is really to say, you know, we did a lot of good work, and we're not going to get everything. You know, as Dick said, there's a lot of issues, right? There's a lot of things we don't agree on. What I put in here, they're sort of like the you know, the top hits of the concerns with the regional agreement. So again, it's a concept. I did ask Chris Lynch at DESI. She did forward this to DESI legal office to see if that could go in the regional agreement. I think it's important that even though, you know, as Dick said, it does kind of continue what's going on, I see it more as a way of capturing those remaining issues and leaving them for a future committee, or leaving them so that the towns don't feel like we're just moving on and ignoring them. I don't want to, again, myself personally, I never really thought that an ad hoc committee is a lifetime appointment, and I don't want it to be. Again, I'm the last one from our committee that's on that. I don't think Kim was, no, because she, no. So Dick Spencer of Washington and I are last men standing, you know, and so every time somebody else comes on, they come on with ideas, some we've talked about, some we haven't talked about, we can do, we can't do. I'm trying to find a way to move forward, and as I said to Hinsdale last night, I need your help. I need help from the towns to figure out how we do this. This regional agreement has stuff for us to do, but it's really about the towns. And that's what I'm looking to do. We've been dealing with this issue with the high school and the vote that's fractured some of these communities. We've been dealing with this for 6 years. And I'm looking for ways to rebuild that trust and relationship with the towns. And some towns might just, you know, they just, I don't know how to address it, but shining light on it, you know, some people could say that it's picking at old wounds, and some people could say it's you know, putting light on them so they heal. But that's where I've been. And that was most of the discussion in Hinsdale. And we did talk about some other, Charlotte talked about them as well from policy. We did talk about some other ways of adding some language to the regional agreement for advance notice, for splitting the vote, for if we were to ever use a popular vote, to have that as a separate vote instead of wrapping it up in the main motion. How do we do this communication with the towns? And I think regardless of if it's a policy or it's not a policy, we do have to talk to the towns before we take debt votes. And that's the thing I hear the most from the towns, is that we want better communication. But then again, nobody comes to the budget hearing, so, I mean, it's kind of a joke. It's not funny. They say you never come to our meetings. We don't go to your meetings unless we're invited. We went to Hinsdale tonight. So it's an area for improvement to take up at another time in the near future. Beyond that, Peru on March 17th, that agenda is confirmed. They have a full agenda, and so I was told to expect around 7 o'clock. Washington, tentatively March 24th. Windsor, the 31st, we'll meet again. We'll talk about kind of where we've been, where we're going, and figure out a way to do this. I'll get some more information from Desi about what we can put in there. So far, we've been told it's pretty limited. But if we can add some of this other language to kind of wrap things up and move on, and strengthen that communication, I think that's it, and we'll bring it back to the committee.
Any questions for Dave? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Is the intent still to get it on the annual town meeting for this year? Because I'm not seeing where that's gonna happen, probably. Well, with Cummington's on May 2nd, I believe, I think would be cutting it close.
Yes and no. The select board did not have an agenda item to debate having, like, when this would fit. The thinking is, and again, not confirmed, the thinking is that they would do something similar to last year where they held a special town meeting. That would happen later. So any changes really have to be solidified by mid-April so it can go to the town lawyers. You know, it's quick, but it's hard to say we're rushing a process after 4.5 years, so. Yes? Oh, sorry.
You're okay.
So of the three that voted the agreement down last year, you've already attended Cummington and Hinsdale. Do you feel like those attendance of those meetings has moved the needle a little bit toward a yes from them?
I feel like with Hinsdale, Hinsdale specifically, because I've been working with them since November, pretty intensively. With Hinsdale in particular, again, this goes back to the vote in the school committee, July. The agreement between Hinsdale and school committee, end of July 2019, they were threatening to sue the district. We couldn't sign papers for MSBA under threat of lawsuit. An agreement was made. The conditions of that weren't, the conditions of that were to be put into the towns to be included in the regional agreement. It was not known at the time that that couldn't happen by law. So that was one of the big sticking points, is that it kind of looked like we weren't doing anything to honor that agreement. And we really didn't. And so just having that clarity and that understanding of what can be in the agreement, I think, and we went a few times around the process for debt and the language on that. I think we have some better understanding. If we can add some of this additional language, like an advance notice, or separating the vote to use N from the main motion to incur debt, I think that's going to go a long ways. Again, it comes down to communication. you have anything you want to add to Hinsdale?
I would say you did a great job.
Thank you.
I mean, it was really, I mean, it's a tough conversation with them, and I think they've done a great job with that. I do think that, you know, I think it's pretty clear that if we add that language for the separating the vote for going to popular vote and then having a separate vote at a next meeting for going to debt, I think that would get them to move on that. And I don't think that's objectionable. That basically means you do it over 2 meetings, and you know, just say, okay, if you're going to have to go to popular vote, you make that that goes out publicly. Then the next school committee meeting, you vote to incur the debt. I think that's reasonable. I mean, to put in, but it means that every town will have to re-vote that if we add that language. But I don't think it's that onerous, and it's not deceitful in any way. It's like, hey, you know, we always know we can do it. I think if you put it in policy, it's kind of like a wink and a nod. We can change policy any time. I think if you put it into the regional agreement, that's the towns agree to that. I think that's a good way to go, in my opinion. And I think Hinsdale would agree to that.
Yeah, and as far as changing Mass General Law 14D, Chapter 71, 14D, which is the process that spells out how you incur debt as a regional school district. If there were changes on that, one member of the Hinsdale Select Board did like that idea, and she you know, might take that on. I offered my help. We do have, and I will say this, nobody's voted on this, but we do have MASC resolutions are due, I think June, somewhere in June, for resolutions in the fall for the so.
For their advocacy.
Yeah, so the way that works is school committees write something that they want changed in the law, new law, whatever, and then at the annual conference, the delegates vote on the different things. And we've gone through these before about school bus arms and cameras and all sorts of things. And so that is a possibility. But again, that would have to get into MASC by somewhere in June. So, and I think that also requires going to the towns and asking their input and support for that. So yeah, there's a lot to do, but you know, I'm an optimist. I mean, except for the budget, but I'm an optimist, and I think we can do it. And if we have a meeting in March, end of March, that's a possibility, and possibly get this off to towns for mid-April.
Any other questions? All right, Superintendent ad hoc.
We're meeting next week, or 2 weeks, March 25th at 7 o'clock on Zoom.
Okay.
Short and sweet.
All right. Any old business? Any new business? Remarks for the good of the committee? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Can I get a third? Roll call vote, please.
Dr.
Yes.
Caprice?
Yes.
Charlotte Crane?
Yes.
Dr. Eberwein?
Yes.
Todd Emerson?
Yes.
Mr. Farella?
Yes.
Ellen Ladazuri?
Yes.
Elizabeth Lounsbury?
Yes.
John Mason?
Yes.
Stephen Morantz?
Who's going out?
Rich Peters?
Yes.
Robert Ronzio?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Sarah Tucker?
Yes.
Kimberly Lee Weatherall?
Thank you all for a long meeting.